Hi, everybody. Welcome to the UCFS Learning Series. We're admitting everybody in right now. We're so happy to have you here today. And so that we have plenty of time to hear from our speakers, I'm going to kick us off with a brief presentation about the Urban and Community Forestry Society. So let me get my screen shared. 1 second. Got to click all the buttons. Okay, Carla, you seeing my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you once again. I'm Leslie Burkus. I'm the Executive Director of the Urban and Community Forestry Society. This is our monthly learning series where we bring to you operational things, big picture ideas, things that will help you get more trees planted in the places that we need them most. This series is brought to us by the Bartlett Tree Experts. They're our exclusive learning series partner, and we really thank them for their support. And you'll hear more from Bartlett over the course of 2025, where we do some really specific things from Bartlett Tree Science, where we'll talk about beech leaf disease in March and some other really specific science-based things that will help you know how to manage the trees in your communities to a greater extent. We also thank all of our members and sponsors. If you are a member with us, thank you for your membership. You are who make these things possible. And if you're not a member, we really hope that you'll join us when the time is right, because you belong here. This is your fellow urban foresters. They are the ones that know you best and will help you do your job to the best of its ability. So if you're not a member, please join soon. This is today's agenda. We're going to go through a few more introductions, just very briefly, some Q&A. And Carla, could you run through our presentation today and who will be speaking?
Sure. Today we're going to be hearing from Lemire Terran from Howard University, Claire Carney from the City of Syracuse, and Greg and Terrence from the Onondaga Earth Corps. And they're going to be exploring how inequality shapes our urban forest disparities and impacts community health. They'll be sharing some powerful tools and strategies to help empower residents to make informed decisions about their community trees. And lastly, they'll be sharing their experience fostering partnerships and coalitions that are really driving environmental justice and equitable urban forests in their communities. So we're really excited to have them. Like Leslie said, we're going to have Q&A at the end. And at the very end, I'll be sharing the CEU credential form so you can get credential CEUs at the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Carla. If you please drop your name and where you're from in the chat. It's really great to see where everyone's coming from and see where we're coming from across the world often. This webinar is being recorded and we will share it with you afterwards. As Carla said, the CEU form will be dropped in the chat at the end and we will submit those on your behalf. And you all are on mute, but at the end we can bring you off mute if you'd like to ask any questions. If you're new here and you're not familiar with the Urban and Community Forestry Society, or UCFS, we are the membership society for urban foresters. If just like doctors, lawyers, engineers have a professional society that helps engage them, helps get them key learning lessons, helps them do their job better, as well as speaking on behalf of them at national level things, that is what we are here for, is to be your professional society and help you build your confidence, competence, and camaraderie for all professionals who are managing trees. And to break that down a little bit more, really, again, we want to be the professional membership home for people who are making or supporting a daily tree care decision. If you decide who, what, where, when, or how a tree goes in the ground, you should be at the society, and thank you for those who are, because we want to make you feel as confident as you can be in those daily decisions. Members have a lot of opportunities to engage with us through our City Trees publication, Arborist Exchange, mentorship program. You can see the whole list here. They're definitely all on our website. You can check them out there. I want to call on a few specific things. Our mentorship program is open right now and it is closing on the 16th. This is a members only opportunity where we help partner you with somebody, kind of in that traditional sense of mentorship, with someone with more knowledge to somebody who's trying to gain more knowledge. But we really see it as a peer-to-peer mentorship opportunity as well. And we know the mentors get just as much out of it as the mentees do. So there's an application on, and really we're just trying to find out what key things you're trying to learn so we can find the right match for you. So check that out. And if you're not a member, there's still time to join and then apply for the mentorship program. We're also really excited. In the next few weeks, we're going to be launching our new membership hub. So this will be another thing that's available for members only, where they can log in, and the screen you're seeing here is one of the chat features. You'll log in and you can put your question in the chat, post a picture, say, what the heck am I supposed to do about this contractor that did thus and such? You can ask your question here and people can answer it for you. There's also a mentorship match behind the scenes too, saying, hey, I have an interview coming up. I'd love to bounce some ideas off people. You can go on to the mentorship match, put those things in, and it'll help match you with somebody who's willing to help you coach along for an interview or something like that. There's going to be a lot of other key features that are available for members. So keep an eye on your inbox if you're a member. And if you're not, please join. Coming up is our LA area meetup. So we're doing more regional meetups. And this is just a way for you to gain some time with others doing things in your area. So there will be one held in the LA area. Our learning series in January is going to be focused on storm recovery and how you could organize an urban forest strike team. And you'll get to find out what a strike team is during that webinar. And then in February, we're going to be having someone come on and talk about communication. How do you sell your vision? How do you have difficult one-on-one conversations with folks? We know those come up quite a bit in this type of work. So we'll be hearing from Rachel Comte, who will be helping share her ideas for communicating your vision. And with that, thank you again for our members. If you are not a member, please join when the time is right. Lemire, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and kick it over to you.
Thank you, Leslie. A lot of exciting stuff coming up. You all have that Why We Do What We Do slide was great. I feel like my blood pressure dropped like 15 points just looking at that happiness. So maybe I need to join up so I can be in better health. But thank you for that introduction. You all have a lot of substantive programming coming up, and I hope this isn't the last time we can collaborate on some things. That being said, let's go ahead and get started today. Give me a moment. And welcome to the, okay, there we go. Welcome to the first part of today's session. We are going to operate in 3 parts: empowering communities through environmental justice and inclusive urban and community forestry. And you may want to take a screenshot right here. We have 3 specific learning objectives. So when we think about the CEUs, hopefully we give you enough substance where you leave informed and empowered so that we can do some more substantive work in our communities. So here, these are the places that we're going to go today, not me exclusively. I'm going to dance, or I'm going to do the first portion, the first third, and dabble a little bit with objective number 2, that is identifying the influence of inequality on urban forest disparities, and also incorporating public health perspective. So we're going to start thinking about environmental justice and the social determinants of health. And then we'll examine some tools that can get folks, not just you, but lay populations in the game. And then finally, we're going to conclude with the last third of the hour, thinking about how can we develop partnerships and coalitions with groups that historically have not been part of these conversations. So let me just tell you very briefly about myself. I am Lemire Tehran. Once again, I'm an associate professor at Howard University. And you can see this is what my classroom looks like. So I love working inside the 4 walls of a tuition-paying classroom. But honestly, my favorite place to be is outside with not just the tuition-paying crowd. I want to work with their aunts and uncles as well. I want to work with grandparents and children. So you can see we're expanding, democratizing what the environmental science class looks like. And ultimately, my research is built around a few things: energy justice, environmental justice, policy. But all this is encapsulated by what we call public science. So how do we get lay populations to be part of the larger urban and community forestry agenda? With that being said, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the work we've been doing over the last several years. Some of you may have joined us for a partner or sister program yesterday. This is going to be an extension to that, but it's certainly going to be 98% new material. So the research we're talking about today, the programming we're talking about today, couldn't have done it without funding from the U.S. Forest Service. And you can see we have a wide assortment of partners. So City of Syracuse, who's on the call today. We have Onondaga Earth Corps, who's represented. This particular project, we partnered with Davie. And at the time, I was with ESF. I was on the faculty of SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry in upstate New York. It's always a mouthful. And this project had 3 goals. Number 1, we created a playbook. How can we get folks in the game and thinking about what's the integration between urban forestry and environmental justice? Number 2, we did a lot of urban heat island maps. You'll see a few of those during today's presentation. And then finally, it culminated, which you're going to hear about in the last portion of today's presentation, in a Train the Trainer program in which we awarded pretty handsome stipends to, once again, lay populations so that they could work with folks like Claire, professional forestry personnel, so we can have neighborhood-centered prioritization agendas. Not just the professional class of folks saying, hey, this is our forestry agenda. We want folks who live in communities to also help shape those agendas. So before we talk about forestry, let me give you a little bit of background of the equality and the environmental justice piece. I'm for sure you all are well versed, but for those on the call, if you're not steeped in the language of environmental justice and racism and environmental inequality, let me offer a very helpful definition from our friends on the West Coast out in California. Environmental justice is the right to a decent, safe quality of life for people of all races, incomes, and cultures. We certainly need to throw gender considerations in there as well, in the environments where we live, work, play, learn, and pray. A lot of strong definitions of environmental justice. This is one of the more helpful ones to go along with the others. And then we need to think about that. Like I said, we need to start talking more about public health. So think about forestry and its considerations or its influence on the social determinants of health. And we can see that the social determinants of health are health considerations and conditions, how these things metastasize. And we just really consider, once again, that live, work, play, how we function in our communities, and how what are the smattering of influences, whether it be healthcare, the built environment, social determinants, educational access, economic stability, how all these things influence not just individual health, but community health. And you can see another depiction here. We start to think about the fallouts of our climate crisis and how the evolving ecologies that are impacted by the climate crisis can inform public health in any number of directions that we don't want to see. So let's get back to forestry, or let's center this conversation on forestry. And I want to think about, well, what is the nexus between environmental inequality and racism and the social determinants of health? What are the consequences of those things, and how we can use forestry to beat back some of those consequences? So we think about the social determinants of health and how all of those factors influence a range of things like life expectancy, disease morbidity and mortality. We saw neighborhood-based disparities, racial disparities, in communities that were very close to one another in COVID morbidity and mortality. We see life expectancy shaped, influenced by all those things we were just mentioning. Some scholars call this death by zip code, i.e., if you live in a community, high levels of poverty, low tree cover, truncated educational opportunities. How does that truncate not just life expectancy, but life opportunity? And then to bring in more of the environmental, we start to think about how the built environment and social policy influences environments. And we know that housing discrimination in the 1930s and 40s in the US, that influences urban heat islands. So we can think about how redlining and racist housing practices almost a century ago create very real undermining conditions in today's built environments. So we'll start off today's case study right here, and it's a story of dreams. I used to work and live in Syracuse, New York, and if you're from the region, you are very well aware, and even if you're not from Syracuse, New York, I'm for sure that you are experienced or versed in the historic practices of citing interstates and highways in quote unquote marginalized communities. Like where your interstate ended up being, that wasn't just by happenstance. It wasn't just accidental. There was a lot of design and thinking. And unfortunately, a lot of times, interstates and other locally unwanted land uses were cited in Black communities all across the country. So from an engineering perspective, this is spectacular, right? That's a dream. Like, wow, I can build an interstate on top of somebody's home. You can see that middle, one of those middle pictures. You have Interstate 81 in Syracuse, New York, that literally sits atop of Pioneer Homes, which is the state's oldest public housing. And you can also see that same interstate running over a place it should never run over, just atop of public park. So from an engineering perspective, this is a dream, right? Technically, it's some would probably say it's quote unquote sweet. But if you live in this neighborhood, you can imagine the noise pollution, the particulate exposure, excuse me, and all the other assortment of maladies that come with a interstate in your backyard. And you also have a dearth of green space in many of these communities. So on top of the dream, the engineering dream or the nightmare for local populations, one of the impacts I think that's most germane to this crowd is that type of infrastructure informs urban heat or extreme heat disproportionately being targeted or centered in communities with high levels of impervious surface. This urban heat island map was taken in 2020 on the hottest day of the year in Syracuse, New York, and you can see there's about a 21-degree temperature spread. Meteorologist comes on and says, "Hey, it's 94 degrees in your community." If you live in a neighborhood with low tree cover and high impervious surface, you're talking about temperatures that are 10 degrees warmer than that. Consequently, if you live in a neighborhood with high tree cover, or if you have a body of water near your home, you're in a relatively cool 83 degrees. So you can see that these past planning decisions, they're informing the very real lived conditions of communities in close proximity to these locally unwanted land uses. So how do we turn the corner, right? This can't just be a doom and gloom conversation. Folks will start to check out. How can we turn the corner? Well, environmental justice gives us a pathway towards healing cities. So we created a playbook, and I'm going to invite you to download this playbook, check it out at the end of today's conversation. We don't have time to go through the foundational questions that the playbook is designed on, but just some very core, let's get you in the game. If you haven't historically been thinking about what are the issues, the environmental justice issues that we should be considering in communities X, Y, or Z, this playbook is going to get you into the game in terms of thinking about new ways to create partnerships, tools that your local populations can be exposed to in a relatively quick period of time, can get them up to speed. So once again, this is about community members who may not be trained in plant or soil science to have a scientific stake and wherewithal to help with forestry agendas and prioritization. So the playbook is built on several things. Number one, we need to reduce disaster risk, extreme heat days, making communities more resilient. Certainly, promoting environmental justice is going to be at the center of everything that the playbook is about. How do we advance public science that is community driven, right? We don't want to just be the protectors of the knowledge behind the university or the research ivory tower. We want to make sure that community members have access to the best science so that they can help create these agendas. And honestly, at the end of the day, not everybody's going to be amplified or motivated by the science. We got to tie economic development to this. And I think our train the trainer program has done a pretty good job in doing that. So we use the science to inform environmental policy. So once again, you have another urban heat island map, which is very similar. This came 2 years later, but you can see we have a little bit different rendition here. What we actually did was we did a 20% land cover change. So if we just change land cover by about 10% from impervious to forestry, we can see radical droppings of temperature. And we did that in neighborhood by neighborhood scale. If you look at it, that's not a fantastic number. And it's not a fantastic number because Interstate 81 in Syracuse, like interstates all around the country, are coming down. So to say that we're going to increase tree cover by 20% at the expense of impervious surface, that's not wishful thinking. That's a very real possibility. So we published something on this recently if you want to know a little bit more about the approach to the policy and the science. And then the far right, you can see one of our train the trainer sessions that we'll conclude with our third speaker today. So here's a little bit clearer depiction, a little bit more blown up version of that same map that we looked at the very beginning from 2020. And then let's just talk about using these tools to amplify and to motivate action. So one thing that we use is iTree. We use it as professional planners and professional environmental scientists, but a lot of their tools, MyTree, iTree Landscape, these tools can be learned by folks who are not degree seeking in a relatively quick amount of time. So you see MyTree on the far left. What does that look like? I know everybody's microphone isn't on, but if you're not familiar with iTree, I love using this tool when I'm working with community groups and locals, because automatically when they see that MyTree benefits label, they think, oh, it's a food nutrition label. So it takes the benefits of forestry, and it packages it in a fashion that's going to look aesthetically familiar to populations. But it's not telling you the caloric intake, it's not telling you the amount of sugar. It's talking to you about things like carbon dioxide sequestration, stormwater mitigation, air pollution removal. And then this middle tool is a really powerful tool. My Tree Landscape, some on this call may be familiar with it, but it really allows that P word I keep using, prioritization, using any number of indicators, local residents. And we're talking about environmental science indicators, social economic indicators, climate risk indicators, using scores and scores of indicators. Neighborhoods are then allowed to dictate the conversation. Well, we want to think about age. What's the age of the local community? That should be a factor as to where we plant trees, young or old. High school degree holders, that should be a factor. We should target low income communities. We should target elderly communities. We should target communities with high concentrations racially marginalized folks. We should target climate risk communities. So My Tree Landscape allows you to do that. But notwithstanding all the scientific tools in the world, if we don't put shovels in ground, at the end of the day, our approach is going to be insufficient. So we couple this science with actual plantings in which, hundreds of people come out and engage in the proper activity of planting and maintenance activities. Can't forget about the maintenance, right? And see, if you're not moved by that far left, you may not be moved by, particulate matter, carbon sequestration. That may be too rarefied air. For some folks who aren't plugged into those conversations, we can also use these tools to quantify economic benefits. So we got to think about multiple entry points in getting folks in the game. So if you're not motivated by the stormwater mitigation, maybe you don't have a basement, you live in the third floor of a building, you live in a high rise, whatever the case may be, you may be excited about the potential to lower your energy bill if we get an ample amount of trees planted, right? And that's going to be directly tied. You remember those urban heat island maps that I shared earlier? The cooler your neighborhood is, or the less wind resistant in the wintertime, the more apt you are going to reach for that thermostat. So just as we round the corner and kind of close out and pass the baton to our next colleague with the City of Syracuse, just a rhetorical question. Where does this community stand in support of just forestry transitions, Not enough just to engage in plantings or maintenance. We need to be thinking about this on a neighborhood basis and also centering those who have historically been marginalized from these conversations, and not just conversations, but actual work and benefits of forestry. And then once again, how do we democratize to add a little bit more meat to those bones? Are we building partnerships with trusted non-forestry groups? Can't just be about the folks who have ecology in their mission statement. What are our action plans? Are we going in thinking we need to center communities that historically have not been at the center of urban forest master planning? And then finally, what does restorative justice look like? If we think about where those interstates were planted, where trees got felled, Seneca Village, NYC, there's a Seneca Village in a neighborhood or a city near you. What does restoration look like for those communities that got sacrificed ecologically and public health, from a public health standpoint, for the sake of planning? And then finally, if we've said or shared things that are compelling, we urge you to download the playbook. You can certainly use the QR code, or you just use the website at the bottom, unlearnpower.org/playbook. I promise you, we're not selling you anything. All this content is free. So take a look, download the playbook, and we look forward to answering some questions a little bit later at the end of the 3 presentations. Claire, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me get 1 second to share my screen, and we are all set. Awesome. So, introduced in the beginning, but my name is Claire Carney. I'm the community forester for the City of Syracuse, and today talking about environmental justice and urban forestry in our city here. Fortunately, let me just make sure my slideshow moving forward. There we go. So, as the managers of Syracuse's urban forest, the role that we play includes creating and maintaining green spaces that are both accessible and beneficial to all communities, with a particular focus on addressing historical inequities. Back in 1999, Syracuse experienced what most around here refer to as the Labor Day storm. That storm was a derecho, which is a very sudden, strong wind event, and it took out tons of trees across our city. Two big things happened with that. The first was we had a tree canopy assessment in 1999, which was one of the first in the country, and that allowed the city to better recognize what is it that we have that we need to manage, what are our gaps, where do we need to improve upon our work, and just better knowing what it is that we are managing so we can respond to it. The other big thing that happened that might not be a positive, but we're still working towards to this day and also directed a lot of the work we do, is that a lot of emotions and different opinions of trees changed in that storm. Folks really experienced maybe the tree fell on the house, their car, in the middle of the street and blocked them from accessing grocery stores or other necessities for anywhere from days to weeks on end. It was a big storm that affected a lot of people, and many to this day still talk about what impact that had and remember exactly how many trees came down and the lack of trees that they saw following that storm. With that, we were fortunate to start on a lot more management of our urban forest, and that included both being proactive towards our young trees, making sure that we had the budgets and the city investment to support that management and to support making sure that who it is who's taking care of the trees and who's engaging with those trees, it does matter, and we're backing that and supporting that. Realizing that tree planting is a youth workforce opportunity also really started to drive a lot more tree planting and growing better management of our urban forest in Syracuse. And in addition, working with making sure when we did our urban forest master plan, referred to in number 3 there, we did include the student or the conservation core base. So young people, youth, and young adults being that workforce opportunity, engaging them with both educating and engaging community members for where our laws and regulations and goals and everything about the urban forest and its future happens to be and trajectory towards. In the city of Syracuse, as I mentioned, having our first tree canopy assessment in 1999, we were also really well fortunate to be home to a couple major universities, one of which being SUNY ESF. And within that, many folks know the U.S. Forest Service station based there, and Dave Nowak, who was, we were fortunate to have do a lot of studies in Syracuse, as being his backyard and guinea pig. We were fortunate to have a lot of iTree studies, including iTree Eco, that has been conducted every year on our urban forests, or every 5 years on our urban forest since 1995. Knowing what we have, where we need to plant, and where our priorities are, where we have surface temperatures, both higher and lower, where we know our tree canopy coverage is, it really directs us to where we're able to provide our services, provide both maintenance, planting, pruning, and educating community members on why we need to plant trees and what is going on in our urban forest each day. In 2013, kind of going through that timeline, a little bit of Syracuse, we were fortunate again to have the county executive move forward on what was coming to a head with our stormwater system, where it was proposed to do a new stormwater treatment facility in an area that we already knew was experiencing climate injustice. And through most grassroots advocacy work, they were able to move that process with the county executive over from being that implementation to being a gray and green infrastructure plan. So with that, including strong investment in tree planting, but not only the planting of those trees, but investing in the workforce development and the youth and the young adults that were part of that community to better the urban forest as a whole. It was also a success for our region, being that it was bipartisan and it overcame any political lines to have green implementation of both stormwater, green infrastructure, bioswales, rain gardens, and tree planting across the city. With that, we looked at diverse work experiences within urban forestry and how since that 2013, the program was Save the Rain, it has helped us to really grow and expand not only planting trees, but also looking at now that we've planted those trees, how are we maintaining them? How do we continue to improve what the public perception is and what the public relationship is with trees through managing them, through taking care of them and maintaining them so that they can become healthy, mature trees that also have a fully successful relationship with the adjacent property owners or whoever lives, works, plays, or prays in our city here. In addition to also doing planting and pruning care, we do a lot of natural area management with those folks in some of our more naturalized park spaces, doing both invasive species removal and planting new species to kind of regenerate that forest growth. Working oftentimes with volunteer plantings, doing many tree plantings with them, volunteer tree prunings, and engaging many community members and community organizations through that process. In the city of Syracuse, it is our policy that we primarily focus on an opt-in program. We want people to have that relationship be positive, as back in 1999, starting then that relationship between the trees and who manages and maintains that tree in your front strip between the road and the sidewalk, or depending on what infrastructure happens to be there, it might not have that sidewalk or a curb or other things. So folks might not even know that that tree is in their front yard, or if it's the city's or their own responsibility. So we want to make sure in our relationship building that we are focusing on folks to say, yes, we do want that tree. There is a small portion that we do have started approaching in the last 2 years or so that is an opt-out program focused very much on landlords and knowing that they have certain properties that are needing an additional tree canopy for that equitable achievement of canopy coverage. This map here that you guys are seeing, this is where we have done door-to-door outreach with the young stewards from Onondaga Earth Corps. Each of those lines is those city streets that we covered each year. It was 2012, and this map doesn't cover it in all, but we did door-to-door outreach through the summer of 2018 with Onondaga Earth Corps. And so we walked all those streets, knocking on doors, having conversations with every person we could have, and being able to use that resource, be able to tap into the folks who actually know each other and be able to go out there and talk and relate. It made such a difference in what we were able to accomplish and what we were able to have the relationship and the perception of trees change through being able to knock on doors. Whether or not the property owner or the person living there was able to say yes to a tree, they were still able to have some level of conversation that would nearly always end positively, to be able to have something that goes back to them that reminded them, maybe trees aren't that bad. I can go back to that conversation. Those young folks, they spoke so well of it. Maybe in a couple of years, my opinion might change and I'll reconsider it. Some of the most positive experiences I had while working with the youth and young adults while doing door-to-door outreach was just being able to have them inspire community members that they knew, or could inspire them to talk to other neighbors down the block, where we might knock on a door at one end of the street, and by the time we got to the other end, the neighbor had already called that person and they had their tree planting request ready to go for us and what species they wanted. So it was really, really positive, and we do look to continue to work through that ground level training of getting those folks up and ready to go out to the field to practice what they're confident in, what they're able to speak about, and then to be able to turn around and plant those trees in the following season. And perhaps through that full program and the full stewardship course of Onondaga Earth Corps, being able to eventually prune those trees and see them make it into full establishment. Onondaga Earth Corps was also beneficial in our urban forest master planning process. Greg will speak a little bit about this as well, but rather than using a typical consultant, we were able to work with Onondaga Earth Corps through training the crews and youth to directly plan and lead the public process, outreach, and marketing for the Urban Forest Master Plan. It wasn't as polished or perfect as a consultant might be, but we really didn't see any difference in the outcome in the end in a negative way. If anything, we saw far more engagement because it was much more inclusive to what our community needed, what would bring folks out to listen. They were very receptive to working with our Conservation Corps, and we had a very positive overall result from both the community members and professionals that engaged through that process as well. As a result of the Urban Forest Master Plan, we're a little bit, I'll go back to saying we're fortunate again for the size of the city that we are in Syracuse. Our master planning process, it did bring together both internal and external players to become more aware of the impact that trees provide, the services they provide to our community, and the need for their management to create an overall healthier city. The people who participated in the Urban Forest Master Plan process also went on to move up within our city and are now the people who are making those decisions and impact our budgets, the approvals for where we can do work, what we are able to work within and the conversations that we're able to have across departments. They became so much more inclusive, and many more doors opened up to welcome trees into the built environment, to be able to invest more in structural soils or places to grow trees in the urban spaces, or maybe shift where a new sidewalk's going to be to create more room for the tree there, recognizing that we do have that shared space within the right of way. One of our favorite kind of pieces that came out of the urban forest master plan was being able to kind of invest more in the staff of it. So my position, as well as our landscape architect that does more design review and processes the trees and development, and then we're also looking to expand into having a full-time natural areas manager. So we've grown as a city, both financially as our canopy has grown, and the people who are managing the urban forest has also significantly grown through that investment in the process, as well as the gentleman who was the head of economic development for the city during the master process, then went on to become our mayor, who has been a great support for backing trees, allocating ARPA dollars to our master plan implementation, to planting and pruning over the last few years, and has also supported our process of modernizing our tree ordinance, which we're currently working with the Green Infrastructure Center and Karen Firehawk on, that we're very excited to see how that changes in the future. And one of those other things that came as a result that we're very excited about was the improved relations with our neighborhood and business development division within the city, which is a group of folks who they work with the vacant lots in our city, and they're a forward-thinking group of people who are not just seeing those lots as taxable revenue, but also as an opportunity to create community greening spaces. And these are lots that typically wouldn't be developed. They might be listed as non-buildable or could possibly be in a floodplain. If they're built in the future, we accept that, for the time period that we put some trees on it and regreen it, it's going to be serving a much better purpose than if we had not invested some dollars in it and had left it as possibly an area that was receiving dumping or overgrowth of undesirable tree species. And one of these locations that we happen to have worked on in the last couple of years was the lot you see in the middle here. This is 701 Tully. This lot here, it was a vacant lot, and it was brought to Forestry by folks from that neighborhood and business development, as well as concerns from the community, being that it was a focal point for a lot of some trash dumping, construction debris material dumping, and it was adjacent to a school. So we worked and in partnership with many other organizations and community partners to work through a design charrette with the students of the school, processing that they we're looking at design, how they want to use the space, what trees they'd want to use in that space. And then, unfortunately, during that same time, that same year process, they were doing the planning, we did have one of the students at the school as well as a teacher there. Unfortunately, where the student was a victim of gun violence and the teacher passed away in a stampede at a concert. And so we were able to shift and include memorial tree plantings and plaques and create a space for these families to have where they can go back to, they can have some respite and recover and be able to recognize where their family was, and the students as well are able to visit this location. This is a project that we do continue to work on in our city. We are using our vacant lots and seeing how they can be utilized more towards community green spaces. And this is something that Greg will be able to talk about in a little bit. I think that is the end of my side here, so I'm going to stop sharing and give it over to Greg.
Greg, you're muted.
Okay. And Okay, can we see the slides?
Right now
Now
we're
we
seeing,
Yeah, we saw
yep,
him for a
this.
minute, but now we see your screen, which is you.
My kids. Sorry about this,
Oh.
folks.
We might be in some sort of metaverse where we're seeing multiple versions of you right now.
Do you see the slide now?
Not yet.
Interesting.
Claire, are you able to run the show if he's not able to get back up and running?
Yep, I can reshare from where I'm at if that's all right. Do you want me to?
Yeah, that'd be great, Claire. So I'm gonna fly through this because I am here with a room full of OEC. There's me, Terrence, who's gonna talk, and some of our crew leaders who are here with us, and our office manager. So Greg Michael with Onondaga Earth Corps. We were started as the Eli McDonald Green Team back in 2003 as part of a neighborhood revitalization initiative that was asset-based. So the community really came together and looked at what do we need to invest in our community, and they chose youth, and they focused on Eli McDonald, our founder, who was rest in peace, Eli. He was an amazing asset and was interested in making sure that young people stayed on track. So we look at youth as a source of opportunity, and as a solution to neighborhood development and the environment. So the slides you see there is just all of those folks doing amazing work in their communities, which are often kind of referred to in this unappealing light of like, what do we do with, you know, our urban centers? But really, there are young people that are a treasure, and there are communities that have been disinvested in, and our undoing of, you know, hundreds of years of unjust practices is to make an investment in these neighborhoods, in these youth. And we do that by putting our youth and young adults front and center in all of our work. So Claire talked about the Urban Forest Master Plan, but there's the young people in our program that were the consultants to the community, to the city, but they were also able to work with professionals like Claire, and our city forester, folks from Davie Resource Group, and really elevate their skill and their confidence in what they know about their neighborhoods. They are also the linchpin in all of our community outreach and education. Nobody better to educate than folks that live and breathe the community. Here's Jay, who's across the table from me, but she teaches college students about urban forestry. She has that level of experience and knowledge. Claire, if you could go to the next slide. This is Lemire doing a workshop with us, but bringing together partners from neighborhood development organizations, our city government, other groups that are adjacent but not necessarily specializing in the environmental realm are coming together at the invitation of our participants and our staff. Memorial trees is, I'll just say one more thing and then I'm going to pass off to Terrence, but one of our crew members, through his interactions with our program and learning and planting trees, he said he had learned to look up, and in the canopy, but also in life, and his message spread to the community. And as a result, community members have come to us. So we're an ally with community members who find memorial plantings as a safe space and a place to heal and recover in their neighborhoods. And then Terrence, he started in our youth program. He went to our young adult program, and now he's a crew leader in our program. He's been involved at kind of all levels of the organization and has a unique view as a participant and leader in this realm. So I'm going to pass it off to Terrence.
Okay, so as you guys can see, my name is Terrence Castro Valdez. A little bit about me. I am a crew leader here at Onondaga Earth Corps. I started as a youth crew member way back in 2018. I was 17 years old. I am 23 now. I've also worked with Walker Tree Care as a horticultural technician and as a regular grounds person on their tree crews. Something I wanted to communicate to you guys about is my experience with Dr. Tehran with the iTree tools. Something that's really been important for me to gain from that experience was learning about not only like, because we all know that trees provide homes, shelter for animals, they provide soil and erosion control, they keep the soil in the same spot, but being able to have these like hard data numbers, like, okay, this is how much carbon is sequestered, and this is how much stormwater it mitigates, and this is the particulate matter pollution, this is the nitrogen, this is the phosphorus. Being able to have that in a easily digestible manner and to be able to show that to people in the community that I work in is honestly empowering, because I wouldn't be as confident as I am in this because I don't have any formal education in this field. But through my work with Onondaga Earth Corps and with different training programs like Dr. Tehran has led with the Community Force Center in the Train the Trainer, it gives me that ability to be able to translate that to community members. And now in my new role as a crew member or crew leader, to be able to educate up and coming crew members the same way that so many people have poured into me as a young person in this organization, I'm able to pour back into my own community. And this helps contribute to more of that procedural environmental justice that we're looking for instead of that distributive environmental justice. Instead of just recognizing that there are areas in Syracuse that are affected by the urban heat island effect. They're still feeling the impacts of redlining instead of just going in there like, oh, we have a tree, put it in the ground. We're involving the community in these processes. And, you know, Tay couldn't be here, my youth program coordinator, but he's also worked in that urban forestry master plan. He was part of that first advanced young adult crew who actually led that. And then now he's my boss here at Earth Corps. He's my direct supervisor. So I don't know, it's just cool to see that evolution and this thing is coming to fruition. But I don't know, I'll kick it back to Greg.
Yeah, so I think we'll turn it over to Carla, and I think we're gonna have questions.
Great. Thank you, guys. This was incredible, and really appreciate having everyone on. And thank you, Terrence, for sharing your experience. Really inspiring. We can open now for questions. We've had a couple of questions come through our Q&A. Maybe starting with Katie Swire, you had a question about the door-to-door outreach that Claire, I think you were talking about, and Katie's question is, who was knocking on the doors? Was the youth corps or park staff? Can you just talk a few minutes about how you coordinated that?
At the time, I was in a different position. I was not with the City of Syracuse's Parks Department. I worked for Cornell Cooperative Extension of our area of Onondaga County. So it was our local extension agent as an urban forestry educator. My role there, we kind of had an interesting partnership where between the city, OEC, and CCE, the Cornell, we were the educators who provided the training for OEC on both planting, outreach, and other areas of the work that they do. And so at the time there, myself and my coworker, we would come into their classroom, we would train them, you know, in the classroom, like, here's how you would do stuff. Here's some scripts. Here's how we practice. So, you know, I'm going to pretend to be behind the door and you're going to knock on the door. And maybe the first time I'm really nice to you. Maybe the second time I'm really mean to you. And, you know, we had fun with it. We got to be like, you know, I'm going to be like, this is your, what role are you playing today? Are you going to be the person who had their tree fall down in 1999, or are you the new homeowner who just bought their house and they're scared of their sewer getting uprooted? So having those different conversations, practicing some of those pieces that were scaring in advance. And then each day that we would do this door-to-door outreach in the summertime, and we would do them in the morning half before it got too hot. So we would do the morning. It would be myself typically, or my coworker would sometimes fill in for me, but it was primarily me at the time. And we would take anywhere from 2 to 4 of the crew members from OEC so that they would have some rotation and change of their work style. And they would come out to the field with us, and we would go through and just, as a group, usually in pairs next to each other, go up, say who's recording the data, who's filling out the door hanger in case they're not there, who's having the conversation, and let's rotate those roles each time and practice and see where we're comfortable at. And then in addition to that, in the afternoon, they got practice speaking on the phone, calling, we have a rental registry, so they would call landlords and say, hey, you've got 13 properties, can I plant on them, yes or no, and have that conversation with them. So that was the side of where we did work with them. We were not sending them out into the field alone. We held their hands the whole time so that if anything did come up, if we did have any concerning safety issues that we did have, and we did face those, you had myself there as somebody who could take that on and not put that on those crew members.
Thanks, Claire. If anybody, we've got a couple of questions coming through on the Q&A, but if anyone wants to come off mute and camera and ask a question directly, feel free to raise your hand or come on out. Not, we got a couple of other questions. We have a couple of questions about the vacant lots. So a question from Joel asking about if there are any food forest established in vacant lots. And then from Leah asking about the permissions for planting on vacant lots. Did you have to acquire permissions from the property owners? I think, Claire, were you able to cover those questions?
Yeah, so we do have handfuls of our vacant lots that are getting turned into food forests. So we're fortunate again in Syracuse to have a group that's called the Syracuse Urban Food Forest Project. And they are really great advocates for both changing our tree ordinance and language for having harvestables and forageables in our urban forests, but also creating a system and a pathway so that you can have a whole trail system of edible plants and trees and shrubs through the city of Syracuse for people to explore. So they do have like piecemeal and patchwork pieces of that kind of going on. There are a number of different uses for our vacant lots, and I would say that the reason we are proactive, as mentioned, the neighborhood and business development group at the City of Syracuse, they are able to look at the sites and the vacant lots that we have in both our inventory of the city, as well as our partner, our land bank partner group. And then within that, they also look at where they can acquisition lots based on tax delinquency and turning those lots from, this person doesn't live here anymore, they haven't paid taxes in 10 years. Nothing's happening here, so we're going to go through the legal process of seizing that land and turning that into green space based on community needs or desires or impacts. So that is a little bit on the different departments and not the Parks Department, but that was again part of the outcome of having a healthy relationship with other divisions within the city. So we do have a healthy stock of vacant lots within our city. We're a Rust Belt city that had a great economic downturn, and they're out there. So we don't have an absence of vacant lots to pick from either.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions? Would like to come off mute?
And Carla, I see a question that might go to Greg or Terrence about the primary funding sources for OEC.
Thank you.
Yeah, so a lot of our work is funded through fee-based contracts with the City of Syracuse, and Claire also mentioned the Onondaga County Save the Rain program. We have contracts with them when that program was running full bore and still to do some green infrastructure maintenance. And then we also apply for state grants through New York State DEC, private philanthropy to fill the gaps. And there are some other pots of money through the city that are focused more on youth programming. So the Conservation Corps model, if anyone's interested, you can check in with the Corps network. But it's a great opportunity because there's funding through workforce and labor. There's potential funding through like the work, and then also workforce development. So it can be really effective, and it takes a lot of different shapes in different communities.
I wanted to
And
follow up a little bit. Go ahead, Craig.
I'll just add too that the City of Syracuse and a number of our partners, we applied for IRA funding, and so for most of our funding has been fairly local, municipal, and then state, and now we'll be receiving some funds from the federal government, which we're excited and nervous about.
Yeah. Thank you, and a lot of people too. Understandable. As we're getting to the top of the hour, Carla has dropped the link to the CEU form in the chat, so please fill that out if you want ISA CEUs. Maybe to Greg or Claire, and Lemire, maybe from your outside perspective, you know, a lot of cities would love to have this type of public-private partnership relationship with a nonprofit that's helping capacity and the relationship going both ways. If you're willing to be vulnerable, or say, just share a little bit about maybe some things that you've had to work extra hard on to make sure the relationship stays really strong, or places that there might come into some tension or conflict. I'm not trying to go negative, but you know, those things come up with these type of relationships. So maybe you'd have some advice for communities that want to start something like this. How do you make sure the city and the nonprofit are working really well together when you both have interests that you need to represent for your communities?
I'll jump in first. Transparency in budgets is essential, and these have to be partnerships, not you're working for me or we're developing partnerships, co-equal partnerships. That's my take on for sure that the other parties have more exhaustive and perhaps thoughtful things to add. But let me just say, I can't believe I heard the devastating news you just shared, Greg, about Eli McDonald passing away. To everybody in the call, you're talking about a legendary forestry figure in central New York. And I was hoping I didn't hear you correctly, and I just confirmed on the phone. Apparently this just happened. So that's devastating. And on a little bit better note, thank you for the nice things you said, Terrence, but the brother Terrence on the call, this guy knows more about forestry and soil science in his finger than I've learned in 40 plus years. So thank you for that. And last thing, quick shout out, Betsy Henry's on this call. I see you. Good to see you, Betsy. But please, colleagues, jump in.
I
I
would
agree with
echo.
the communication as we talk over each other.
Go ahead, you go first, Claire.
Oh, I was gonna say, right, communication partnerships, like you said, you know, continuing to have the open line of communication. I also worked in a city where we had a tree planting nonprofit, not a conservation corps, and I definitely love the conservation corps at the end of the day, because it is holistic. There's a mission there. You are there for the community, not just for the trees. And urban forestry is half trees, half community, and you can't have one without the other. And so the Conservation Corps, I love it as a city partner because it allows me to pay people from the community to do the work that we're looking for without having to hop through political hoops or any of that side of things.
I think you also have to play the long game in these relationships. Like we talked about the Labor Day storm, the relationships that have come to fruition have been building ever since then. And leveraging each other's strengths. So sometimes the city's the stronger applicant for an opportunity. Sometimes OEC is a stronger applicant. And when we can each bring resources to the table to accomplish a shared vision, that master planning process, I think, was very helpful. We worked on that with our partners, the city, and with community members. So when you have that as a goal together, you can weather the bumps.
Yep. Thanks for that. Well, we are about at the top of the hour, so I think we should probably wrap here. I know there's a few more questions in the chat and in the Q&A. We will follow up with a link to this, and then we can follow up with the contact information for everybody on this call as well. So please do reach out. I know Claire and Lemire and Greg and Terrence would be happy to answer any questions you might have. So thanks for joining us today. Please join us for our next webinar in January, and we'll look to see you soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.